No, Dad. No. Yes. Yeah, I will. I will, Dad. He's doing fine. I said he's doing fine. No, you don't need to come over. I've got a sitter. Yes, I'm sure. Okay, you too. I said I love you too. No, I still don't know any details. Just where he wants me to pick him up. Yep. Yeah, okay, you too, bye. When Dad finally let me hang up, I sighed hard and slid my phone back into my pocket. Just too late to realize I'd already passed into the school zone, still doing almost 40. I scanned the street in a panic to make sure no one had seen me on my cell, but it was too late. A cop car behind me had already put on its lights and was signaling me to move over. Damn it! I slowed to a halt on the side of the road in front of my son's school and avoided the disapproving glare of the crosswalk guardian as I waited for the officer to smugly waltz up next to me. As I rolled down my window, a look of recognition washed his face, followed by a tinge of sadness. He must have been one of the officers on scene a couple months back. Oh, hey, it's you. How you holding up? I'm fine, I lied. Here's my license and registration. Can I just have the ticket and leave? I need to pick up my son. He shook his head. No ticket today, ma'am. Just a warning. He let out a weighty breath, the corner of his mustached lip curling in a sympathetic half smile. Seriously, for your boy's sake, be careful on the roads, okay? I'm gonna have to ticket you next time. He handed me my license and folded insurance papers back, slowly walking back to his car. I took a moment to gather my breath and turned back around into the kindergarten pickup lane. I hoped none of the other moms had seen the incident, and especially none of Ben's teachers. I quickly wiped the tears from my reddened face before Ben excitedly hopped into the back seat. I didn't want him to see me like this again so soon. We turned out of the school, and I saw Ben's messy red hair bobble in and out of view in my rearview mirror as he scanned the surrounding roads. Mommy, you're not going the right way. Home is back that way, he said with all the confidence of someone who had only recently learned that there were more streets than the ones to school and to McDonald's. I know, sweetie, but we're not going home right now. I'm taking you to Katie's house. She's going to watch you for tonight while Mommy takes care of something really important, okay? I told her you can stay up until 8:30 and watch a movie tonight. Doesn't that sound so fun? He squinted with confusion, about to ask where I would be tonight, before his eyes shot open and he leaned forward in his seat with excitement. Does that even mean that I can even watch Transformers? I chuckled softly. Yeah, Ben, you can watch Transformers. I dropped him off at his sitter's house, thanking the young woman for being available on such short notice before I handed her $30 more than her usual nightly fee, telling her I'd be back by around 8 the following morning. I waved at Ben as I pulled out of the driveway, punching the address I had been provided into my phone. I winced as it pulled up the homeless shelter, 7 hours away. My brother Parker hadn't spoken to our parents at all in the years since our eldest brother Benjamin had committed suicide. He always blamed them for ignoring his cries for help, for not recognizing his mental illness until it was too late. When he moved out, he had left me alone with Mom and Dad, and I had resented him for it. It had been hard to live with them even before Benjamin died, and with him gone, Mom had become angrier and more temperamental while Dad just got sad. It wasn't until 5 years ago, when I reached out to Parker to let him know I'd be naming my son after our brother, that my relationship with him had started to gradually recover. He was even there for me when my Ben was born, which was more than I could say about Ben's dad. He came around every few months between jobs, and up until about a year ago, he had been a semi-regular part of our lives. Mom and Dad would always try to have me put him in contact with them, but I always told them no, that it was Parker's bridge to rebuild when he wanted to, not mine. When he got the offer for the foreman position in Nevada, I was happy for him. Little Ben waved him goodbye as eagerly as he could, and that was the last time we had seen or heard from him. I wondered if he'd left for good again, and my frustration towards him only built every time Ben asked me when Uncle Parker would come back. After a couple months of no contact, the anger had turned to fear. I'd just about given up hope of ever seeing him again. That is, until I got the text from an unknown phone number earlier that morning. "It's Parker, need pickup at homeless shelter address in Kentucky. Come alone, bring food." I can be naive, but I wasn't stupid enough to immediately accept it was really him. My mind had been racing non-stop for the better part of a year. The thoughts and theories always lingered behind my daily routine: robbed, kidnapped, murdered, joined a cult, alien abduction. Any of the 1,000 things that might explain my brother's disappearance could have also now been trying to lure me in, almost 2,000 miles from where I last knew he was. That's why I didn't plan on driving to the pickup location until he called me about an hour later, and his familiar, albeit raspy and exhausted voice begged me to get him. It's why I made him tell me our brother's name to verify it was him. It's why even after I agreed, I still drove over to my parents' place before I picked Ben up from school and nabbed my dad's handgun from his bedside drawer. The afternoon and evening alone in the car sped by rapidly, my thoughts idling with swirls of hope and apprehension. By the time the lonely building on the side of the road came into view late that night, I'd only roughly planned out what I was going to say to him, much less what I was going to do. I nervously rolled into the lot, the dim beams of my minivan illuminating the decrepit signage outside the homeless shelter. Haven's Hope, it was called. I reminded myself I wasn't in familiar territory as I scanned the parking lot. Even the more urban parts of Missouri felt rural compared to back home. And despite the state of the building and the scraggly homeless man resting in his wheelchair at the end of the lot, I felt safe enough to get out of the car and head inside. As I walked towards the front door of the building, I took a deep breath, all preparation for my reunion with Parker going out the window with each step. The sound of creaking metal startled me from behind, and I turned quickly to see the emaciated man in the wheelchair hurriedly rolling towards me. "Hey, I don't have any money, I'm sorry. I'm just here to pick someone up, I have to go." I hurriedly turned back to the shelter and quickened my pace, my hand subtly reaching for the handgun in my pocket. He called out to me again, "Gab, it's me, it's Parker." I halted momentarily, recognizing the voice even through the parched, hoarse throat. I turned back to get a better look. It was indeed my brother, although I had never seen him worse for wear. His entire body was extraordinarily thin, his once stocky and sturdy frame atrophied away to almost a skeleton, save for his still muscular arms, firmly gripping the rims of his chair's wheels. He wore a loose-fitting gray hoodie smeared with oil stains, along with a pair of shredded blue jeans bleached white with the blazing sun. His face was red and calloused, covered in long locks of bushy, unkempt beard and hair. Beneath it all, though, it was still him. He still had my brother's eyes. "Oh my God, Parker, what happened?" I stopped myself. The how of the situation could wait for now. After over a year, my brother had finally reached out for help, and the last thing he needed was me asking what led him there. "I'm just so happy you're alive. Do you need my help getting into the car?" He smiled at me sadly for just a moment, turning his tired gaze towards the minivan. "Nah, I can hop in myself. Would you mind just loading my wheelchair into the trunk?" "Of course, yeah, anything." He swiftly rolled back around, wheeling himself over to my passenger side door with a startling swiftness and using some impressive upper body strength to maneuver his frail body up into the seat. I put down the back seats to make more room for the bulky wheelchair, wishing I'd known to leave the car seats back at home while I struggled to fit everything in. I tried my best to be subtle as I rolled down each of the back windows a half-inch, his smell already attacking my nose from outside the car. We drove for about 15 minutes before I remembered his request in the text message. "Oh shit, I forgot to bring anything to eat. You still like Burger King?" "I like anything, don't sweat it." "I'm going to sweat it. You need a decent meal or two. There's a BK up ahead. What do you want?" We sat in the parking lot for nearly a half hour, avoiding small talk as we ate. He'd put down 3 of his Whoppers and a large fry by the time I finished my meal. I decided this would be as good a time as any to start asking a few questions. "Parker, where have you been? What happened to you?" He chewed intently for a moment, swallowing before putting down his burger. Workplace accident. I took a pretty big fall, lost my legs. I figured, the wheelchair, but I mean why didn't you call? How'd you end up on the streets? His expression hardened, and I caught a shimmer of a tear in his eye as he turned from me. Just a bad situation. Ended up in company housing for a while after the accident. They tried to keep me pretty comfy so I'd be quiet about it. Didn't end up working out, so I bailed a couple months back. You bailed? What does that even mean, Parker? You didn't think to reach out, and so you've just been, hitchhiking from Nevada since then? Pretty much. It was a bad situation, okay? I'm lucky I'm alive. The company wasn't good to me, Gabby. I couldn't get my phone or my records when I left, so I've been kind of off-grid. I was trying to stay that way as I made my way back home, but the panhandling fun ran dry once I made it here. I lost everything. You didn't lose me. I wish you would have called sooner. We drove through the night. Parker slept silently while I drove, but exhaustion never reached me. My mind was too preoccupied for sleep. Aside from a brief trip to stop for gas, my eyes never left the road, and my thoughts never left Parker. It was nearly 9 in the morning when we finally arrived back home, the orange glow of the morning sun already replaced by the blinding white of day. I hadn't realized how messy my yard had become until it came into view. Parker gave me a sideways glance. You probably hoped I'd be able to start mowing for you again. Sorry to disappoint, he chuckled. I rolled my eyes as I stepped out of the car, wheeling his chair around for him. In truth, it was probably time to downsize anyways. The house and yard were too big for just Ben and I, and keeping up with the maintenance had become more of an issue than I'd cared to admit in recent months. I offered to help him over the small step leading up to my porch, but he waved me off and hopped it with ease, rolling through the front door. You remember where the shower is? I think some of your old clothes are still in the front closet too. Get comfortable and make yourself at home. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Where are you going? To pick up Ben from the sitter. I wasn't going to leave him alone all night, you doofus. His face scrunched with confusion for a moment, and he looked at me incredulously. Benjamin, Gabs, I'm talking about Benny, not... Please tell me you didn't forget my kid. His befuddled look was washed away with the red glow of realization and shame. Shit, yeah, little Ben. My bad, it's been a long year. A knot formed in my stomach as I looked at him. He had been a lot of things in his life, but he had never been forgetful. A small itch that had nagged the back of my brain since he went away was shooting warning signals through my entire mind. Was it drugs? Had his time on the streets been darker than he'd let on? It wasn't like him to forget even something as simple as a birthday, much less his whole nephew. These were questions I would have to address later. I was already an hour late for picking Ben up from the sitter. When I arrived at her house, her mild annoyance for my late arrival was chased away as she saw the bags under my eyes. Long night? She asked. Drove to Kentucky and back. Ben's uncle is back in town. Her eyebrows shot up. No kidding, he doing okay? Ben's going to be so excited, he's missed Parker a lot. She was right. Ben had always loved my brother. Sometimes more than he loved me, it seems. I just had to figure out how to explain why Uncle Parker would be so different before we got home. I buckled Ben into his car seat and was quickly reminded that children lack both subtlety and nuance. Mom, you stink bad. I know, honey, we'll ride with the windows down when we go home, okay? I started the car and turned to leave as my phone began to buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out, declining the call when I realized it was from Dad. I'd call him back later. Ben, I have something awesome waiting for you at home, but it's going to seem a little weird at first, okay? His eyes lit up. Is it a dog? Dogs are stinky sometimes. Is that why you stink, Mom? No, sweetie, it's not a dog. Do you still remember Uncle Parker? I didn't even have to check my rearview mirror to know he was practically bouncing with glee the whole way home. I explained that Parker was home and that he'd be staying with us for a while. I chose my words very carefully when I told him that Parker had gone through some really hard times and may look and act just a little different than before. When I told him that his uncle's legs didn't work and he had to use wheels to get around, Ben fell back in his seat for a second before smugly chiming in. Like Optimus Prime. Sure, like Optimus Prime. As I pulled into my driveway, a glimpse of white flashed in my mirror, another vehicle coming in behind me. I recognized it almost immediately, cold blood shooting through my veins. Behind me, the large white pickup truck came to a stop, and my dad stepped out of the driver's side door. I nearly tripped running out to meet him. "Dad, what are you doing here? You can't be here right now. You can't be here." He laughed and put his car keys in his pocket. "Do you have it with you?" "Do I have what?" "My handgun you took from my drawer yesterday. You didn't do anything stupid with it, right?" I felt my face blush, and I moved to get Ben out of his car seat. He jumped out and ran to hug his grandpa, while I sheepishly turned to retrieve his gun from the car. I walked back around, handing my father his gun. He holstered it with one hand, the other still wrapped around my son, as he lifted him up to carry him on his shoulders. Ben giggled, then cupped his hand to whisper something in Grandpa's ear. My dad's eyes went wide, shooting to me before falling on my house. "He's here, right now?" "Dad, please, you know he doesn't want to see." He pushed past me, eyes set like stone on my front door, Ben still laughing atop his shoulders. "I'm going in to see my son." I followed him inside, pleading as he marched with resolute determination. He didn't have to call out or search for Parker, who was already waiting patiently in the living room, freshly showered and dressed in clean clothes. My brother looked up at my dad, who was setting Ben down on the floor gently. His eyes glassy, he looked back at me for a second. I expected betrayal in his face, anger even, but there was none. He almost looked excited. "Dad? Holy shit, it's been too long. It's so good to see you." For as shocked as I was, my father looked even more taken aback. Even before his disappearance, Parker hadn't spoken with either of our parents in nearly a decade, their wounded relationship seeming like it never could have recovered. After years of cold indifference and no contact, here he sat, as though greeting a long-missed friend. My dad stepped forward slowly. "Parker, your mother and I have worried about you, a lot. What happened to you? You're sick?" I watched in awe as they spoke, their conversation awkward and stumbling but earnest. Parker's face was lit up the entire time, his smile unwavering. I don't think he blinked once. He even leaned forward out of his chair to give my dad a hug. It must have been 2 minutes before I looked downwards, realizing that Ben had been tugging on my shirt. He looked wary, his eyes large and his lips pouted. I picked him up, and he tried his best to whisper quietly in my ear. "Mommy, who is that? When is Uncle Parker coming home?" I turned to look at him, soothing him and running my fingers through his choppy auburn hair. "Baby, that is Uncle Parker. I told you he'd look a little different, but that's him, I promise." He turned his gaze to his uncle as I set him back down on the floor, his apprehension unwavering. "That's not Uncle Parker, Mom. Uncle Parker isn't like that." He had lost his poor whisper at that point, and his comment was heard by both of the other parties present. Parker turned to look at Ben. "Hey, little man, you remember me, right? It's so good to see you." Ben clung to my leg nervously as Parker grabbed his wheels and moved closer. "I don't look too great, I know, but it's still me, bud. Come here, give me a hug." Ben let go of me and slowly moved forward, nervously giving Parker a little high five before stepping away. My dad stood up to leave, his face still pale, his eyes glinting with something halfway between hope and sorrow. I'll be back around, sometime soon. Maybe bring Mom around too. Gab, you have my gun?" I pointed down at the holster concealed in his pants. "I already gave it to you in the driveway." His eyebrow raised accusingly at me, confused until he reached down to feel the handgun at his side. He apologized for forgetting, hugged his son and grandson goodbye, and left. The moment he was out the door, I turned to my brother, my voice hardly containing my mixed shock and awe. "You actually talked to him?" "Of course I did. I've been gone a whole year, Gab." "I mean, yeah, but Parker, you haven't talked to him or Mom since you were like 20. After what happened to Benjamin, remember?" A wash of recollection filled his face for a moment. Oh yeah, I guess that's true. I think I don't want to hold on to that anger anymore, you know? I didn't buy it, but if he was finally making moves to rebuild that burnt bridge, it wasn't my place to stop him. Little Ben hardly took his eyes off of his uncle the rest of the day. He peeked around corners, watching timidly as Parker made best attempts to help around the house in the few ways he was still able. There's a strange feeling when someone re-enters your life, especially after a period of complete absence. When they're gone, you're left with a person-shaped hole in your routine. It may be a small hole at first, something you could step over and ignore. In time, it grows so large and monstrous that no matter who that person was to you, you risk stumbling down into that hole at any moment. The hole shaped like my brother was massive by the time he came back, and although part of me knew the differences in his ability and appearance accounted for much of the still remaining gap, I could not help but feel as though the person who had come back into our lives couldn't possibly begin to fill the pit he had left behind. Parker's return was as awkward and clumsy for Ben and I as it was for himself. He seemed largely self-sufficient in his needs, setting himself up in the spare bedroom without assistance. Much of his daily activity was performed in silence, with him largely either unaware or uncaring to the busy bustle of my life. For several days I woke up early for work, attempting to make breakfast for him, only to find he had already prepared a meal for himself in the kitchen. He'd sit eating with my son, silently chewing and staring out into nothingness until noticing me, giving me a dry smile. Ben, although tolerant of my brother's presence, still avoided warming up to him. He was quiet mostly, just staring at Parker most days. He hardly played with his toys anymore. Their once close relationship was irrevocably broken, but Parker didn't seem to pay it much mind. I had almost forgotten my father's promise to return soon with Mom when I realized a month later that he hadn't so much as called. When I called his phone to confirm if they'd be back around soon, I was left with his voicemail message. I tried calling back the next day, still to no response. To my great annoyance, it seemed I'd have to reach out to my mother in order to get a hold of them. My mother answered the phone immediately, her curt and accusing voice cutting off my greeting before I could get out a word. "You have some nerve calling back here, Gabriella. How you could do this to your father, I will never understand." I paused, taking a deep breath. "Hi, Mom. Nice to speak to you too. What are you talking about? Is Dad still pissed about the gun?" She scoffed. "What gun? I don't know what you're talking about. All I know is he came home from your house, and he hasn't been himself since. I don't know what you said to him, but he hasn't been this depressed in years, not even in March when—" "Mom, I didn't say anything to him. He came to get back his handgun I borrowed. And he and Parker talked for a bit, and he left pretty happy, that's all. Is he okay?" There was a nervous silence for about 10 seconds before she responded. "Parker? He's home?" "Yeah, I assume Dad would have told you." "I already said, Gabriella, he's hardly said a damned word to me. Why didn't you tell me? Oh my God, what did Parker say to him?" I rolled my eyes, telling her that I still didn't know of anything that would have set Dad off. I told her I'd be over soon, and I'd bring Parker along too, so that they could also reunite. In truth, I was uncomfortable leaving my brother home alone. When we arrived at my parents' house, I scanned Parker's face for any signs of emotion. There was none, just a vague blankness, like the house meant nothing to him. He'd grown up in this home, hadn't seen it in years, and now it was as though he'd never been there. My mother was waiting for us at the front door. At a glance, I could tell her mood was as soured as it usually was, her arms crossed with exasperation and her lips in a downward turn. At closer inspection, though, there was a twinge of something else slipping through the cracks, something I hadn't seen in her in quite some time. Fear. She glanced at Parker with an unfamiliar, accusatory worry, as though she had no idea who he was, before an ounce of warmth entered her eyes upon recognition of her only living son. I looked down at my brother, whose aloof look told me he hadn't caught the swirl of half-emotions brewing from within my mother's cold exterior. He simply reached out his hand, offering to shake hers. "Hey, Mom, good to see you again." Mom looked at me with a raised eyebrow, which I met with a shrug. She extended her hand back out to meet his, and they exchanged a strange sort of shake, something halfway between an arm wrestle and a tug of war. "It's nice to see you again, Parker. We've missed you. Please come in." As we crossed the threshold of the house, a grossly sweet smell assaulted my nose immediately. From the living room, I could hear the rhythmic wheeze of laborious breathing, punctuated by small grunts and crackling pops, as though the very act was a strain upon the lungs. "Your father has hardly moved since he came home. I can't get him to eat, and he's still not talking to me. Go in there and fix whatever you did to him, now." I rolled my eyes, opting to forego arguing for the time being. As we entered the living room, the smell intensified rapidly, my nose rejecting it and forcing me to begin gasping through my mouth for breath. There, sat upon his favorite recliner, was something I'm barely comfortable with describing as my father. There was a news story in our city a few years back about a woman found dead in her home after having lived alone for several years since her elderly parents' death. In the last months of her life, she had stopped her daily routines, stopped taking care of herself in the few ways that she knew how to do without her parents. She stopped bathing, changing, even getting up to use the bathroom. The police chief, a friend of my mother's, said that it was a miracle she had managed to survive as long as she did on that couch, with no food or water. I'd had the misfortune at the time of seeing the pictures of her body. When they found her, she was so frail and skeletal that her body didn't even fill the indentation she'd left on the cushion. Her skin, pale and scabby, had started to slough off in the areas it was exposed to air, the other portions of it fused to the couch. The detail that stuck with me most, however, was the woman's eyes, shriveled and glassy in their sockets but open nonetheless, still locked onto the TV. I was reminded of the pictures of that woman's long-dead body as I looked at my still-living father. In the span of the single month since I'd seen him last, he seemed to have shed almost 60 pounds. His skin hung loose over his rigid frame, his aged wrinkles pulled by gravity so that flaps of loose, smooth skin hung like rags from his face and arms. His hair had begun to fall out from his head onto the cushion behind him, forming a silvery matted halo. Dried phlegm stained his shirt, as though he'd been coughing it up for days. His ragged breath shakily raised his bony chest every few seconds, sputtering salival trails spewing from his gaping mouth from which the scents of rot and mildew swirled. His eyes, emotionless and expressionless, were blankly locked onto my brother. Mom seemed annoyed and perplexed as I called 911. Over my own shouting towards the operator, begging and pleading for medical assistance immediately, I could hear her interjections, insisting he was fine. He was just depressed, or quiet, or just needed a talking to. Parker remained silent, his gaze never leaving my father even as the paramedics strapped him onto a stretcher and took him away. The police questioned my mother thoroughly, and all the while she blankly asserted she didn't think anything was wrong. They took her in for questioning under suspicion of spousal poisoning soon after, and I was left alone with my brother again, in the house where we were raised. He seemed largely unaffected by the whole ordeal, opting instead to roll around the place, curiously looking through our parents' stuff. I nearly vomited as he wheeled towards our brother Benjamin's room, still untouched since his death, and calmly asked whose it was. My dad died in the hospital that night. The doctors had an exceptionally difficult time moving his body, his flesh tearing and spilling at the lightest touch. They compared the degradation of his internal organs to the latest stages of radiation poisoning. During the litany of tests they managed to perform on him in the few hours he was still alive, a brain scan revealed he exhibited the symptoms of advanced dementia, his gray matter riddled with holes and decay like moldy cheese. Mom wasn't able to attend the funeral. The confusion she exhibited prompted the police to keep her in custody, moving her to a temporary psychiatric facility for observation. Ben was devastated when I finally told him the news. As flawed as a man he was, he'd been such a good grandfather to my son, especially in recent months. Parker spent the days leading up to the service alone in the spare room. I assumed he ate and showered while I was out of the house, but I never saw him. Not that I particularly wanted to. In my head, my brother had not actually come home. The man that returned from whatever traumatic ordeal he had endured was not the same man that had left, but clearly just a shell. The funeral was largely filled with my parents' friends, the few that still lived nearby. It was a quiet service and fairly short. I remember thinking that it seemed as though the pastor was keeping it as general as possible, as though he had hardly known my father or cared to remember things about his life. People came and wished us condolences as politely and awkwardly as I thought was possible. Each of them paused to double-take at Parker, who sat emotionless with eyes glassy and unmoving as he stared at the casket. I had enough of his bullshit by the time we got in the car for the short drive to the burial site. I angrily turned the ignition and huffed as he sat still as a stone. "Parker, what the hell is wrong with you? You just sat through your own father's funeral and didn't even react. You've been weird since you've been back, and it's getting worse, and I'm tired of it. Ben doesn't know you. I hardly recognize you. And I deserve to know what happened to change you so much. You owe me that." He sat still for a minute, his gaze as empty as usual as he looked ahead. I hadn't gotten a close look at him, but he was nearly as worse for wear as I was. He'd cleaned up for the funeral, but his tired wrinkles were etched into every crevice of his face. The color seemed to drain from his eyes, and I noticed his hair had significantly thinned, likely from unseen stress. He looked hollowed out, gutted even. I felt Ben tug on my dress from the back seat as he asked for my attention. "Not now, sweetie. Mommy's having a grown-up talk. Trying to, at least." Parker shuffled in his chair, finally speaking. I was alone, Gab. I took my eyes off the road to look at him and saw a tear running down his cheek as his gaze remained dead ahead. He spoke with lucidity I hadn't heard from him since the night I picked him up at the homeless shelter, maybe long before that even. "I don't mean socially or anything either, I mean alone. You remember how I said after my fall I ended up in company housing?" he said. I nodded, shushing Ben once more as he tried again to get my attention. I should never have been there. From the day I showed up to the day I escaped, I didn't interact with a single person, not once. I saw no one, spoke to no one. It took me months to even realize it was happening. I believed so hard that I deserved to be forgotten that I didn't even realize I was isolated. My neighbors were fake, Gab, just recordings, I think. The cars on the streets were fake. I was the only person there, and up until the end I didn't even know it. The company I went to work for, Whitlam Hawthorne, they kept me there intentionally, I think. They did something to me, studied me in some way. Once I got out, I couldn't even find it again. The entire lot was just gone. His voice trailed off, and I looked over to see his eyes had once more glassed over, the tears drying from his face. "Jesus, are you serious?" He didn't respond. He was back to the indifferent silence I'd become accustomed to. Maybe there was a chance I could still get my brother back, though, to get through to him again. Ben tugged on my dress one last time as we pulled up to the cemetery. "Mommy," I sighed, finally turning back. "What is it, sweetie?" "Can we visit Becca since we're here?" I tilted my head in confusion, my gaze lingering on him for a second before I responded. "Becca, sweetie. Who's Becca?" There was a shock of betrayal in his eyes, and he turned away into his car seat, sobbing inconsolably. I was utterly confused, my mind racing to try to figure out what on earth he was talking about. I pulled him out of the car seat after I helped Parker out into his chair, and he ran ahead of me towards the burial site, his crying unceasing. I chased after him, leaving my listless brother behind by the minivan. Ben ran towards the empty plot where my father would be laid to rest, several attendees already gathered around and watching solemnly as my son ran ahead. To my surprise, he ran right past the open grave, towards a plot just on the other side of it. I was out of breath when I caught up with him, as he laid huddled, sobbing over a gravesite. Between panted breaths, I began to scold him for running away, when the fresh headstone he clung to finally caught my eye. The epitaph read, in full, Becca, last name, January 2020, March 5th, 2025. Beloved daughter, sister, angel. My thoughts scattered, tumbling through confusion. Had Becca been one of Ben's classmates, some child who died recently, and somehow I hadn't heard? Why didn't I know this girl? Why did the name twist something in my gut? But the questions that truly undid me, the ones that knocked the air from my lungs and dropped me to my knees before a grave I did not recognize, were these. Could it be mere coincidence that this little girl shared my last name? That she'd been born on the exact same day as my son? I felt a shaky hand on my shoulder and turned to see an old man behind me. It was Philip, an old friend of my grandfather's who had been like an uncle to me growing up. He must have flown in from Colorado today for the funeral. He helped me to my feet, calmly offering me a handkerchief to wipe tears from my eyes I didn't realize had formed. It's all happened so fast, hasn't it? I'm so sorry, Gabriella. First the car accident, now your father. Please know I'm here for you. Whatever you and Ben need, always. I choked out the words between sobs I could not control. What accident? Who is Becca? What's going on? He looked at me with shock, soon washed away with a pained grief unlike any I had ever seen him wear. Becca, my dear, your little girl. Are you sure you're okay? Do we need to get you out of the sun? I was a zombie for the rest of the burial. A million thoughts entered my mind, swirling and chasing each other away with abandon and disbelief. My little girl? A daughter? A car accident? How could I forget something like that? Was it even possible to forget something like that? Why could I not remember her? Philip had to be mistaken somehow. Some way he was wrong. I only had one child. It was just me and Ben versus the world, right? After my father was laid to rest, I didn't speak another word the entire way home. Ben quietly sobbed in the back seat, Parker sitting motionless in the seat next to me. When we arrived back home, he silently rolled his chair into the spare bedroom, leaving me alone as Ben retreated to his room to continue crying. I sat for several hours in silence, staring ahead and building up the courage to go into Parker's room to confront him. I knew what I would find in the spare room before I turned the handle. As I opened it, stepping inside the dimly lit area, a wave of shame and pain flooded my mind as the memories of the accident raced back in. A rainy night, a dark one, a beat-up car, swerving into the crosswalk after getting T-boned, colliding with something small on the crosswalk, something precious, something joyful and happy and pink. I remembered her little dress as vividly as the pink walls lining her forgotten bedroom now screamed accusations towards me, plaguing my aching mind with the memory of the daughter I had lost twice. I had fallen impossibly deep into a person-shaped hole the size of an ocean I'd somehow missed. He stood in the corner, shoulders hunched, as he looked up towards a Barbie poster that Becca had asked him to hang up on the wall for her 4th birthday, just before he left. Drool spilled out of his open mouth, his wiry arms limp at his sides, as his crooked legs supported his twisted body with impossible strength. He didn't react to my entrance in the slightest. His chair sat knocked over in the corner of the room. I went to pick it up, my eyes never leaving him. As I righted it, I moved towards him silently, ready for anything. Had he lied? Could he stand this whole time? He finally turned to face me, locks of grizzled and clumped hair falling from his scabbed scalp as the rapid motion of his twist echoed a guttural crunch in the small space. His eyes were blank, his pupils whitened and cloudy as though he were a blind man. As he focused on me, my own vision blurred, and my head began to hurt. I felt my train of thought slip away, the recollection of why I was in the room in the first place leaving me as his gaze returned, his pupils darkening again with the first signs of alertness. He seemed to be remembering who I was, recognizing my face, as my own mind faded, and I forgot more and more. He looked down at his twisted legs as they collapsed, the memory that he was supposed to be paralyzed returning to him as he crumpled to the floor. My hazy mind struggled to keep up with the situation while he just kept looking up at me and smiling, his features softening by the second as he struggled to form coherent words. Finally, through broken teeth and raspy breath, the words came out. "What's your name, lady?" As he said it, I forgot. The feeling of my very name being taken from me, kept out of my grasp, stolen by the no one that was once my brother, sent me reeling. I screamed, an echoing sob that rang through the house. He slowly reached out to grab my leg, but I stepped back, regaining just enough of my faculty to run. With one last look back before I slammed the door behind me, I saw Parker's chest convulse as he vomited a mixture of blood and bile out onto the dusty pink rug onto the floor. There are things worse than cancer. There are diseases scarier than HIV and deadlier than the plague. I don't know what it is that my brother carried back with him from that place he lived alone for so long, but I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. It doesn't rob you of just your body. It will rob you of your mind, your memories, your identity, in ways you will never recognize until it is too late. It stole my father from me, and my mother will follow soon. It stole what memory I had of my daughter. It stole my name. Sometimes it is slow, and sometimes it is as quick as what it did to my father. I think Parker is the germ. I think his touch is a curse, a pathogen in of itself. I think maybe the process can be reversed, with time and with distance. I took my son, and we called an Uber to take us as far away as possible from that house, from that room, from that thing that used to be Parker. My memories are coming back slowly, surely. I remember my name, Gabriella. I remember my daughter, Ben's twin sister, Becca, who died in my arms on the street just a few short months ago. I remember my brother Benjamin, who killed himself because he believed he'd been forgotten while he was still here. I hope my son will be all right. I hope that whatever else was taken from us both can be returned, that we can still heal. I hope he'll forgive me for leaving his Transformers back at home during my rush to grab him and get out of there as soon as possible. I'm not sure if he even remembers the toys anyways. We're on a Greyhound bus right now, on the way to Philip's house in Colorado. It may seem like a long way to go, but I think it's better that way. After all, I can thankfully still remember his address. Hello there. So, what did you think about the story? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to find out more about what happened with Parker, there's a prequel from his perspective. Here it is on screen or in the description below. Stay creepy and see you in the next story.